My name is Chris Ryan. I am a co-host of the Watch podcast at The Ringer, and I'm so excited to introduce the cast and crew of Mountainhead, which you just watched, starting with the casting director, Francine Maisler. The editor, Davies. Costume designer, Lyall. Director of photography, Marcel Zyskind. And then some of our actors, as Jeff, Ramy, Youssef. As Venis, Cory, Smith. As Super, Schwartzman. And then let me introduce the writer, director, and executive producer, Armstrong. And we have a special guest remotely joining us as Randall, Carell. It feels very Mountainhead somehow. Jesse, I'll start with you. Why don't you walk our audience through the speed at which this project moved? Because I know it started with a book review, and it seems like it was a very, very condensed process.
Good. Well, it's lovely to be here. I hope you enjoyed the movie, and thank you for all being here. Thank you. Yeah, pitched in December, written in January, pre-production in February, shooting in March and April, editing in April and May, and on TV the other night.
I have so many questions about this whole process, but the one thing that jumped out is, this was your feature directorial debut, and I was curious whether your first time in the director's chair taught you anything about Jesse Armstrong, the writer, that you maybe didn't know before.
It's a good question. It's a good question. Phil. What did it teach me?
Pacers won tonight, guys, and who cares what
Yeah, I mean, the bit that I was relatively confident about was from being a showrunner and being around actors on set, and that was the bit that I really enjoyed and felt decent at. I'm kind of drawing. Let's move on. I don't think I've got anything interesting to say about what it taught me about being a writer. I guess as a showrunner, you end up thinking about your material in that way a little bit. So yeah.
If you think of something, feel free to jump in later on. Francine, I want to go to you. Surprised you. Because I wanted to talk a little bit about the pre-production and the casting process. When something is moving this quickly, how did you work with Jesse and Frank and some of the other producers to fill out these key roles?
Well, I got the call from Jesse or HBO, I think, in December. And I was just like, put everything down, whatever he's doing, I want to do. And then I asked when I could read the script. And then they told me there wasn't a script and that we had to get a cast by March. And then I had a heart attack. And then after that, Jesse, Frank, and I became this trio of putting this wonderful cast together. So it was the hardest thing not the hardest thing I've ever done, no, because of the speed. And everybody who was available raised their hands to do it. So that was the easy part. But there really had to be a very specific dynamic between these four. So we really worked. Frank was right in the front row. The three of us basically texting all day and all night and putting grids together. And so there's so much more to say, but so gratifying and just it was hard. And I don't, you didn't think it was hard, Jesse?
It was hard, but I just know you've done a lot, so I'm slightly chastened to hear it was the hardest thing you've ever done.
Well, I felt the pressure, you know? I felt the pressure because I so admired Jesse and Frank and just didn't want to let them down. That's the truth.
So I have a general question for the cast here, and Steve, I guess I'll start with you just because I want to get you involved here. I was curious for you guys how much familiarity you had with the kind of guys you were portraying, and specifically their vernacular, like their way of talking, their vocabulary, the rhythms of their speech. Steve, were you interested in this subject matter before the project came to you?
Oh yeah, I grew up in this world. At a young age, I had no connection to this world at all, and none of these people are familiar to me. These aren't circles that I travel in, thankfully. So it was all new, and it was like learning a different language. And Jesse is an incredibly kind, really funny man with a gigantic brain. And so it was our responsibility to try to decipher what he had written, make sense of it, and then sort of embody a character based on those words.
What about for some of the other guys in the cast? Was there any kind of familiarity with the, I don't know, even the podcasts that come out of this world or anything like that?
I knew a little bit about the All In, and I had been to actually a few of these mountain chalets with kind of tech people. Like I'd actually been once or twice, and they didn't quite talk like this, but a lot of the people that they knew did talk like this. And so that I had a little bit of familiarity, but I think when we showed up with this text, I think the first time we said it all out loud together, it instantly really clicked. Like it was, and I think we all kind of had that moment where we were looking at it at first, and it's a lot. At first, you go, "Holy shit, this is like a lot of fucking words," and then you say it in front of everybody, and you see Steve Carell, in person, and you're like, "Shit, he looks really good," and like he's just like his pants look good, and then you're like reading the stuff, and you go, "Wait, this actually is how these people would talk." And I feel like so many of the big key scenes that start the film, we shot them on the first day. And I think that is a testament to just how the writing was so, when you listen to some of these people talk, it really worked, the way it kind of clicked together, yeah.
I do listen to a lot of podcasts on like business and technology just because I'm curious and horrified and terrified, like maybe some of you are. But the thing that I was not comfortable with or familiar with was the vernacular, the language, the verbiage that Jesse had created. So, the task being to learn the lines first, and there were a lot, and there was a week and a half to do that in. The thing that I wasn't sure of until we were all there, the four of us together, was how this language is really used in an interpersonal relationship. Because it's just, it's almost like doing a period piece where the language is not of our own. It is different. And that was actually the really rewarding thing once we got started, because it was like 4 different kind of vehicles on a racetrack together. And once we were like, foot on the gas, and all of this was just, coming out, and you're on set with these phenomenal actors, that was really thrilling because it was happening so quickly and we were responding so quickly. And this is kind of the magic of what Francine did, was somehow pair the 4 of us together, and it just like exploded, I think, for all of us mutually, like using this language, which was just so fun.
They've said everything so beautifully, but no, it's when I read it, I remember it, as you say, it was like a period. The rhythm is, I've never heard rhythms like that. I've read, and to read them, it was in English, but I was aware instantly that this was a different rhythm and group of words and vernacular, as we say, and then I listened to some of the things that Jesse recommended, and lo and behold, it was amazing, because I feel like he truly tapped into what those rhythms are and those tempos are, and it was a real, how often you get to basically learn a new language for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, I wanted to ask you, Randall is in some ways the villain of this piece, but he's also kind of got the most human condition. I mean, he's dying, which is something that will affect all of us, although he's trying his hardest to cheat that. How did you balance the sort of intellectual superiority complex that Randall obviously exhibits with that frailty? Because it's such an interesting combination.
Well, I'll start by saying that in television shows now, I am either dying or I die. That's all I do at this point. He's an interesting character because he is willing to essentially sacrifice the rest of humanity for his own immortality. And that's a pretty, talk about a God complex. That is a big trade-off for one human being to make, and to not necessarily feel great about it, but be able to justify it. So he's coming into this story with an awful lot of baggage, and certainly a great deal of motivation to make things happen and make things go his way.
Cory, I wanted to ask you about the physicality of Venis, because you're always like exploding all over the room, or like coiled up, or lying down kind of like performatively, and I wanted to know if you had a sense of like what this dude's regimen was, like what is his kind of like, not only his diet or like what he's up to, but like how did you dial him in as like a physical specimen as much as like this titan of industry?
The physical identity of him was really important to me. I remember one of the first things I said to Jesse, and I think I said it to him repeatedly, was I was like, I had this instinct that this guy should be really intense, but if I'm like too far, please dial me back. I'm like, I'm a little nervous, if I like go too hard, that it's a little too scary and not funny, or if it's too funny and not scary. Like, I just wanted to find this mix, but yeah, I had a sense that this guy is like into bioengineering and taking a lot of supplements, and I wanted him to feel like you don't know if he's on testosterone, you don't know if he's on coke, ketamine, like is he dosing something at all times? He comes back from talking to the president, he's a little bit slower, like did he just take something? Like constantly sort of shifting and exploding, and most importantly, it needs to be sort of upsetting to everyone else, especially Jeff. And so it's just like creating like a low frequency tone that's kind of always upsetting. And that's achieved, through his like physical manifestations of excitement and thrill. And I'm glad that came off and I didn't just seem psychotic.
Ramy, I interviewed Jesse earlier today, and I think he referred to Jeff, if I remember correctly, as the tragic figure of this film. And in some ways, to me, he's like, obviously, like, to some extent, the audience POV character. He's the one person in the room who's like, wait, what did you guys just say? Obviously, at the end, there is this corruption of him to some extent. So tell me a little bit about Jeff's arc and how you saw it.
Yeah, first off, I'm just super grateful that Jesse, wrote these roles for us and allowed us to play them. And I think when I first talked to Jesse about the role, he kind of said, hey, I think this is a cool opportunity for you to do something that people haven't seen you do before. And he at some point, I think it was like, yeah, just, I want to make sure you can be an asshole because you seem like a really nice guy. And I was like, no, dude, call the marketing execs at Hulu, they'll tell you. And so I got to kind of like play with this range of, he's obviously a dick, but then he does see what the audience kind of sees. And but then he's also, I think what ends up happening at the end, and you know, between him and Ven, I kind of, when I finished reading it and when I got to play it, I was like, he kind of scares me the most, because he is openly tortured. He actually sees all the points of view, and he still makes the decision that he makes. And it sits a little bit differently to me than some of the other guys in the film, because they are so blinded by their vision of being accelerationists, and they don't stop, you know, and they're kind of like, oh, whatever. And there's something sometimes a little more troubling to me about the guy who does stop, who does look, who takes in the suffering, and then goes, okay, yeah, but I'm gonna go cash out anyway. And I thought that was a really a meaty thing to kind of play with, because obviously he's put on the ropes. He's super emotional, you know, all those things get to happen. And so I had a lot of fun kind of starting and ending, not knowing really, you know, if he was doing the right thing.
Steve, Ramy just referenced the end of the film there, that moment between him and Cory's character. There's this incredible moment of you in the backseat of your SUV, kind of Michael Claytoning as you drive away. And I don't really want you to answer this question, but I want to ask, do you know what Randall
All right,
is
I guarantee I'm not going to give you an answer. Go ahead.
Do you know what Randall is thinking in that moment?
I do.
Okay. Is there a version of it you want to share with us?
No.
Okay.
Well, no, I mean, in very basic terms, I think he now faces his mortality. I think, you know, I think that's the crux of it, is that, well, now he's out. He's not first in line to become, you know, for his brain to be
Transhuman, I think, is the term.
yeah.
Right?
So he's not, you know, he's so now he will die. Like that's essentially. I mean, I think it's very simple. And it's just a very pure human response.
Jason, I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about the house.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're an actor playing a part of the host. You're hosting these guys.
Yes.
Did you find yourself actually developing like a different relationship to the set, to the production design? Because this is nominally, even though he's just moved in and he's got some mixed feelings about the interior decorating, it's his place. And I was curious whether or not like you developed a different relationship with the set and had like put yourself in the role of the host almost.
I mean, I didn't like it when they would say slightly negative things about the house, to be honest with you. You know, I really came to defend that place, and a lot of work went into that place.
Were you turning me around, or were you defensive about the house?
A what?
Were you really defensive about the house, for real?
Yeah, because they keep saying it's this, and I'm like, it's not. But that's these guys. I mean, these are my friends. You know, what can you do? But I will say, yeah. You know, also I think in my mind and what Jesse said, this might be my character's sort of maiden voyage in this house. Like he's been building it, so he's experiencing it sort of for the first time too with his friends, and I think he wants to share it. And it was built for them and this friendship. And I think it hurt when he said those things. I know it did. But I love the house, and I can tell you everything about it.
Yeah. Can I ask, where did the turbot thing come from? Because that's my favorite line of the movie, is just the bottom feeder fish that he's going to throw in the steamer. Do you remember?
Where it came from?
I was just curious, Jesse, you had like if you had a turbot anecdote with this.
No, I think it's just a comedy. I think Sam Bay, my old friend and writing partner, is here, and I think it's certainly in British comedy writing, if you're flailing and the scene isn't working, if you can put a bottom feeder in there,
yeah,
it usually works. A halibut or a turbot are gonna get you out of trouble.
It's just a great name.
Wait, this is like a common thing in British comedy?
Yeah.
It's like a your mama joke? You just name a different kind of fish?
You put a haddock Nice meet to Haddock in.
Oh, jeez.
Wow.
Marcel, I wanted to ask a little bit about both the challenges, but also maybe.
They've lost all respect for me. I could see him. He was like, I thought he knew all about tech and he was kind of a smart guy. It's just fish.
Just fish jokes.
No, I'm like, what a hack, yeah.
Marcel, could we talk a little bit about the challenges, but also maybe some of the surprising advantages or pleasures, or things that you noticed about shooting largely just one location for the most part, this house, which obviously has all these different nooks and crannies and rooms and levels, but
But then you liked.
yeah, yeah. What were some of the challenges you faced at lensing this?
Being able to control what we usually control it was not possible here. So it's like letting go of control as a DOP, and then live with that. And I could live with that. Having great colleagues in Jesse saying it's going to be all right, I'll trust you. And yeah, I think when we were scouting, and I would just want to say out that it's been a pleasure to be part of the project so early on, when there's actually no script. You see things come together so quickly, scouting the houses, finding the house, deciding about the house, and then seeing the house thinking, oh my God, how are we going to do this? Because in any moment it could change the weather outside. It could be a snowstorm, it could be full sun. So, but thankfully we have these wonderful actors in front of the camera that deceives the audience. So suddenly it's snowing in the background, no one knows. But yeah.
This audience might have noticed. We have to be careful here.
We did put in a lot of thought to the planning of how to shoot the scenes, and in terms of timing, because I did quite extensive light paths and stuff with the sun. So when we should shoot and when we should not, or we move on. And we had cover sets in other parts of the house as well. So
That's really cool. Susan, in my experience, the richer the guy gets, the more casual his clothing becomes, but also the more expensive it becomes somehow. So can you tell me a little bit about dressing these millionaires and billionaires?
You're not wrong about that, with that assessment. And what they would wear, even if it was, it was a thermal underwear, it was cashmere thermal underwear and so on. And when you look at a lot of billionaires, many of them are very banal in how they dress. So it was just finding, each one of them finding their place in it.
Did you find that the clothes influenced the performances at all? Like where you got the vests, you've got the different casual workout wear, but also high end. I mean, did you find it jumping into the performance? Yeah, I like this. I can rock this.
I think you need to talk to them about wearing long underwear on screen for 14 pages. That's what I think. And that was a very special request from our director, that they should be deciding the world's fate while wearing thermals. I have to say, everyone was a little shaky when I mentioned that in the fitting. That's your costume for this long. So, yeah.
Mark, my question for you gets sort of back to the remarkable speed of this production. But I imagine, were you cutting while shooting was still going on? Can you tell me a little bit about when post began, when production's so fast?
Yeah. It was a blur. It was very fast. We start cutting as soon as it starts shooting. So after day one, on day two, we're cutting the material from day one. But that's an assembly. So usually by the end of a shoot, you have a sort of very rough film that you get into the cutting room and think, what are we going to do? But here we started fine cutting while the shoot was going on. So we meet with Jesse on the Saturday. I have to say that Bill Henry was the other editor as well. So there were two of us. But we would we'd meet Jesse on a Saturday and review what we cut that week and have notes, and we'd start fine cutting that material as we were continuing to assemble. So when Jesse came back from Utah, he'd seen and given us quite a lot of notes on it already. I don't think we'd made many cuts at that point, but certainly we'd honed it. And then once he got back, We had about a week, I think, and a half maybe, until we had to pitch a rocket. I mean, normally you'd have 3 months, but we had about 10 days. But thankfully, you know, amazing performances, amazing script, beautiful pictures. So it meant that, you know, we didn't have any problems. We just had to make it a bit shorter, I guess. And we had a lot of help with that from some brilliant notes from our execs and writers and producers.
I'll end with this, Jesse, and I'll start it with you, but if anybody else wants to jump in, it's kind of an open-ended question, is basically, like, how did the experience of making Mountainhead change your relationship to some of the things discussed in it? Whether it's the technology that these guys are iterating on, or maybe even your relationship to something as simple as your phone, or obviously the headlines continue unabated since the release of the film even, so it feels even more prescient. What are your thoughts on that?
For me, it was kind of the period of thinking about the writing of the film, the writing of it, the making of it, was kind of like a holiday from the anxieties which a lot of us feel probably about advances in tech, in particular AI, but probably all of our relationships with our phones and our devices. In that, for the period of writing, developing, and making it, it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's more stuff to put into the film. That's all raw material that can go into the film. And then there's that slightly sad feeling as that process is over, and it's like, oh no, this is what we all have to think about. And maybe, you know, as some of the characters in this film hope, and we all have to hope, things will turn out really well, and the best versions of those technologies will, you know, enhance our lives. But it's scary, and it was in some ways nice to be able to pour that into the work for a while.
Yeah, anybody else have any feelings on the same question?
I'll you go, and then I'll go afterwards. You got great answers. Yeah.
No one can follow Jesse, I don't think.
You go.
I'm
giving you
stupid if I said anything.
I think for me, it was the beginning, as you know, Jesse, as you said, had been delving deep into that world for a while and was in it, and so for him it was maybe this vacation, and for me, knowing very little about the world, it was my introduction, and it was all I watched and thought about and tried to learn about the entire time we were making it, and I thank Jesse for including me in that, and kind of you know, getting to try to make something that makes you afraid and laugh, and to play these people, I feel like I feel like my eyes have been sort of opened because of the not. I mean, I don't mean to say that I didn't know anything, but because of Jesse, I think through this character, I think I really got to learn and understand a little bit more about a world that I probably would never have been able to touch in my daily life in Studio City.
Ending on the Studio City plug is wild.
CBS.
Well, I'll just wrap it up there then. Thanks so much to the, it's like, it is the best way to end Studio City.
Thank you so much. These are the best questions.
Yeah, but everybody give a round of applause to the guys from Mountainhead.